now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other two books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. Over the weekend, I got a chance to take a look at The Suicide Squad on HBO Max. Now, The Suicide Squad movie is a reboot of the Suicide Squad movie franchise that was started in 2016. And after that movie was critically panned and roasted by many critics for just being terrible, your Warner Brothers has decided to regroup by recruiting director James Gunn from Marvel Studios and the Guardians of the Galaxy films to make a new interpretation of the Suicide Squad. Now, this Suicide Squad film is based on the classic 1980s comic book series, The Suicide Squad. And in that comic, it was about a group of supervillains who were recruited to become a part of a team called Task Force X. And if they complete their mission and survive, they get time shaved off their prison sentences, or in some cases, they wind up getting pardoned if they complete their mission, depending on the writer. And in this version of Suicide Squad, we have a team that was set up early in the movie that is a bit of a bait and switch. So Amanda Waller sets up one team to go out with Harley Quinn and several of the members of the original movie's team, like Captain Boomerang, and we're believing that this is the team that's going to go on the mission to the island of Corto Maltese, which is actually a homage to the 1989 Batman movie where Vicky Vale talked about going to Corto Maltese to help them take down this Starro creature and this guy, the Thinker, who has been working with them towards building with this Starro creature. Now, the team that they originally send out, you're thinking it's going to be one team. Unfortunately, what happens in the early part of the movie leads to the demise of many of the members of that team, with the exception of your Rick Flag and your Harley Quinn. And those are the only two characters that wind up surviving the initial onslaught before the camera takes us over to the new members of the team that are recruited. Now, this new team is a more unique and eclectic mix, and it's James Gunn, instead of staying true to the comic book material, deciding to go in a different direction. Now, your James Gunn wrote this Suicide Squad movie and chose all of these characters, many of whom were just adaptations for the movie. Now, your Bloodsport in the comics is a completely different character than the one presented here, and I have to say that this Bloodsport that they presented is a far more interesting character, and Idris Elba gives him some nice layers as related to his character. The same thing with the so-called Ratcatcher 2. This is another character adapted for the movies because the Ratcatcher was never a female in the comics, but they make her a female for the movie, and the actress who portrays her does a fantastic job of conveying emotions in this film. And other actors who do very well in their roles is John Cena as the Peacemaker. He's this stiff, straight-laced, conscientious guy who just is so by the book that it makes him into a villain in some ways. Now, in the comics, the Peacemaker is a hero who goes to extremes, and we get a little bit of that with the John Cena portrayal of the Peacemaker here. And in addition to the Peacemaker, we have the Polka Dot Man, who comes from Steve Ditko in the comics, and the Polka Dot Man's uniqueness is brought to life here in the movie. And along with them is King Shark, who was portrayed by Sylvester Stallone in a very nuanced performance as related to the voiceover work here. And the King Shark character is a scene stealer in this movie. So the Suicide Squad after the original team is murdered off and some of the characters wind up meeting horrible ends, and these or the other jobber team winds up dead, we get the new squad going into action. And as this new squad goes into action, we then see them working towards the goal of working past their own issues as they're on Cultural Maltese, and then trying to go out here and complete this mission. Now, as they're working towards completing this mission, they run into some rebels on Cultural Maltese, and this is something that is an ongoing thing as related to the DC cinematic universe all the way back to 1989, because again, Vicky Vale talked about the massacres in Corto Maltese in Batman 89, and there's a political struggle in Corto Maltese because the original family that ran the island, it was murdered, and now there's a power struggle between a general and the new leader. And that general finds Harley Quinn. I'm not going to give away too many plot points here, and it leads to her and Rick Flag. They wind up getting captured, and they go on a mission to release Rick Flag, and then later on they go on to take on Starro. But now this movie is, I will say, is extremely gory, extremely violent, and extremely disturbing, but in some ways extremely a lot of fun to watch, because these quirky characters working together are one of the things that make the comedy really stand out in this very dark comedy, because your Suicide Squad is not anything lighthearted. It actually does a good job of mixing action and adventure with dark comedy, and that's one of the things that really works very well in this film, is that it does do a good job of showing all of those dark comedy elements and making it work along with the action and adventure. So your Suicide Squad this time does not take itself as seriously with James Gunn as it did with the original director, I believe David Ayer, and this version of Suicide Squad captures more of a spirit of old style DC comics and many of the absurd ideas and notions as related to them. And in addition to capturing the spirit of all of that absurdity of many old school DC comics, it also has a really big heart, because all of the characters in this film are very well developed. I mean, every character here is very well written, and the acting here is way better than I've seen in many of the other DC Cinematic Universe films. It's a lot more nuance to the performances and a lot more chemistry to the acting than it was in the previous films. The previous Suicide Squad felt really stiff, but this one feels a bit more dynamic, and the characterizations are a bit more on point than they were in the other Suicide Squad movies. So this film really does a really great job of rebooting this franchise. Now, the only issue I had with this film was the presentation of Bloodsport and the interaction between him and Amanda Waller earlier in the film, because in that part of the film it looked like they were trying to break down a black man, and by saying that he was an irresponsible father, and that was something I did not like seeing. And then you have your Amanda Waller acting like a ratchet black woman, threatening to do something to Bloodsport's daughter if he did not go on the mission. That was the one thing I had an issue with as related to the film, and I felt that element really was unnecessary, but then James Gunn then shows that it relates to him and the Ratcatcher's relationship. And again, while I like that element as part of the plot, I just didn't really like that whole element as related to the story. And the whole thing is that the black daughter was shown on the same road of being a criminal. And again, I didn't like those kind of elements in the story, but that's just one of the things I had an issue with the ratchet black woman using leverage on the black man in an effort to emasculate him and make him submit. That's the only thing I had an issue with in this film. But overall, the Suicide Squad is a way better film than what has been presented in the original premise, and it is one of the stronger films in the DC extended universe. and it definitely is worthy of a sequel. And I think we're going to get a sequel of something as related to the end credits. So this is a film I can, if you like dark comedy and you like graphic and gory violence, this is the film for you. I mean, this isn't a superhero film for everybody, and I definitely would not recommend young kids go out here and watch The Suicide Squad because this film is extremely graphic, extremely gory, and extremely violent. And this is not one for kiddies. It is R rated, and it's not one for everyone. I mean, if you like stuff like Deadpool, you'll definitely like The Suicide Squad. And if you like stuff like Deadpool, then this will definitely be the movie for you. Now, if you want to see me be able to do more superhero movie review videos so I can pay for things like HBO Max, you can donate to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my action-packed African American fantasy fiction, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback. Those who refuse the gift of eternal life are condemned to wander in the darkness of eternal night. Get your copy of Eternal